you commented on something Max Papis tweeted, and I didn't read your full comment, but his tweet was, my opinion, space then a period. I'm sorry, I'm not going to make finger grammatical errors here. I hear many race car driver after the race stating, today we had a 10th to 5th place to 20th place car, etc., etc. I feel this is a very wrong statement to make. How would you feel if it was reversed and your crew chief would say today we had a 10th place driver? I've been told that many times. So,
yeah, I understand what he's saying, and I think that he's right in a sense that the driver could be maybe more specific on how he says that. It rolls off the tongue pretty easy to say 10th place car, and my defense of it, of the driver side of it, is saying that I think the driver has more to do with the performance of the car and the setup of the car that ultimately results in what level of a car it is than what Max is giving credit for, or what the perception here of the statement is giving credit for. You know, the driver, the setup of the car is a result of the driver's feedback and the crew chief's interpretation of that feedback, right?
Yep.
So, you know, I think a driver has every right to get out of the car and be like, this is a 10th place car. Now, if the driver, you know, the smart thing to do is get out of it and say, hey, we had a 10th place car today. I didn't, maybe, you know, I don't know. We just didn't make the right moves and on the car. And that's okay, because the driver's involved in those moves, right? The drivers, I can think of plenty of times in my career where I left a race and was like, dang, I shouldn't have told him to tighten the car up, or I shouldn't have told him to loosen the car up, right?
Yep.
The crew chief did what I told him to do, and we ended up with a 10th place car instead of a 5th place car, right? So I don't agree with what he's saying in that sense, and I also don't agree with, like, I think the crew chief has less to do with a 10th place driver or a first place driver than the driver has to do with a 10th place car or a first place car, because the crew chiefs usually aren't nearly as involved in the driver's preparation of himself as the driver is on the direction of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
You know, now in other racing series like Formula One or in Europe or wherever, you know, the engineering teams are a little bit more involved in the driving style of the driver, of how they want the car to be driven. Is that true?
That's true.
Maybe.
Yep. No, you
but
are
in
absolutely
NASCAR,
true.
it's very much part of the culture of, like, the driver is the driver. We're going to work around his driving style.
Yep.
Right. And, you know, the drivers don't spend a lot of time with the crew chief on their driving. They do. They look at data, they analyze data, but the drivers, especially nowadays at a Chevy team, right, the drivers are working with their driver coach.
Yep.
And the crew chief has some to do with that, but
to elaborate on your example, you know, when I'm getting ready for road courses or anywhere actually right now, I have a friend who works at RCR in the sim department or whatever, and so he's so good at reading data that if I'm struggling, like at Watkins Glen, we did a pre-sim about 3 weeks ahead of time, and I was struggling down in 6 and 7, and I couldn't quite figure out what I was doing wrong. He looked at my data, identified it, and then we went and spent an hour and a half at an RCR sim and worked through it. My team never even, you know, they knew I was there doing it, but it's not even their, you know, it had nothing.
Right.
It didn't matter to them. It's like, you go figure it out. We trust you to figure it out, and, you know, you'll drive it correctly when you figure that out. So
here's maybe another point of where now the more I read this and we talk about it, it's like I disagree with what Max is saying, because it's like if a crew chief said we had a 10th place driver today, that is a personal attack. Now, it might be true. It might be true because you could probably find a time in your career where you're like, shit, I don't know if I brought everything today.
yeah,
I wasn't there. I could have done better. I was a 10th place driver.
Yep.
Right. So I'm not trying to say that every driver is a top tier driver and you can't ever criticize the driver. But to say we had a 10th place driver today is a pretty direct and personal attack on the driver, where for the driver to say we had a 10th place car, I think the driver can absolutely take some personal responsibility in that doesn't need to offend every single crew member on the team. Now, With that said, not every driver looks at it the way that I just said it.
True.
And there's plenty of drivers that get out of the car saying, we had a 10th place car, and they meant it as like, crew chief and engineers needed to do better for me. but that's ultimately a driver that will lead to having a 15th place car and a 20th place car and a 25th place car, and then not have
out.
anything.
Yep. I should have elaborated more on his tweet because there was more to it. He said, stating the above is like telling all your team that their work/effort is worth that. I would rather say something like this. Today we were aiming at a top 5 and we all came up short, or something along this way. Words matter even if the intention was genuine and correct. Yeah, I think his comparison is wrong to your point. It's Josh typed this in our chat. The equivalent of his statement would be, we had a 20th place crew chief today. It's like, that's a personal attack. Car, we're using as a euphemism for overall decision-making, performance, so on and so forth, right? It's
right.
A group together statement. It's not a you versus me, and as you put it, sometimes people mean it that way, but I'd say a majority of drivers think of it as or as Josh just typed, a culmination of everyone. It's a, this is a together statement that we're just saying this was our level of performance today as a group. And car is just being used as sort of the subject of that, but it's just terminology.